recycling to reduce extraction. So it's not just about using what has already been produced, it's also making sure that you basically use less, which I think is a very important point. And he also showed us how the Tanzanian laws are there and embrace or can embrace the recycling activity. I think several times there is a difference between what is written on the law and what is actually being done. And if we are all more aware of the laws, we can use those laws in our favor, because I think they are all on the same side here, trying to reduce the amount of waste that is out there. Just in only statistics, we currently in the world produce over 2 billion tons of waste in a year. And we are expected to produce over 3 billion tons of waste in a year by 2050, which is actually our waste is growing more than the population, which means that we are all consuming more. It's not just that we have more people in the world, it's also that the people that are already there are consuming more. So I'll go back to Dr. Samuel's points on extraction and how recycling is an important business here. Just for the ones who may not be aware, there is a chat box here. So if you go to if you look at your Zoom on the bottom, there is a button there called chat. And so you can click on that button and then you can go there and you can write. So you can write your questions. I'm receiving and I'm collecting all the questions that have been here, so that we can try to answer them at the end of the presentation. So with no further delay, I would like to now introduce our second speaker, which is Dr. Hussein Mohammed Omari. He's a holding PhD on environmental science. He's registered town planner working and environmental officer at Vice President Office, Division of Environment. He has 15 years experience working in local and central governments. Also, he has been working as environmental consultant for various organizations, including IPE Global Limited, Palladium Group, and Forum for Climate Change. He has published 11 papers on the areas of solid waste management. So he's very well known, I think, by us, and also someone that you can learn a lot from. Karibu sana, Dr. Hussein Omari. Please unmute yourself here. You are still muted, so you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. If you go on your Zoom, on the left, on the bottom. Oh, I think we lost him. No, there he is. You need to, wait, let me try. Alan, you may be able to unmute him for us. Oh, now you are unmuted. We still can't hear you. Now you are muted again. Cannot hear you. Let me invert. So I would recommend that you try to leave the meeting and come back so your audio reconnects, and hopefully that solves the problem. And so while we do that, then we can I can introduce our third speaker. We can then speak maybe first. So I'd like to introduce to all of you Mr. Abdon Mapunda. He works at the Ilala Municipal Council as the head of the Department of Environmental Conservation and Solid Waste Management. He has a diploma in local environmental management of urban areas, University degree in forestry and nature conservation, Masters of Integrated Environmental Management, Master of Business Administration, 7 years experience as a natural resources officer, 6 years environmental officer, and 5 years as the head of Ilala in environmental conservation and solid waste management. Karibu sana, Mr. Mapunda. You need to unmute yourself as well, please. Now you go.
Okay.
Yes,
as you introduced me, I'm Mr. Mapunda from Ilala Municipal Council. I'm head of Department of Environment and Waste Management. The definition of recycling and the importance of recycling I've already discussed with the Dr. Mafwenke, and it goes further to the use of recovery of materials and everything. But me, in my side, I'll try to look the responsibility of local government in managing solid waste in the different municipalities. And yeah, according to the EMA, Environmental Management Act number 20, 2004, stipulates clearly the role of local government in managing solid waste. The solid waste produced in these cities is very large because you know, there is a high population of people we have in the cities. For example, in Dar es Salaam, we have almost 6.7 million people. All of them are producing waste a day. And for example, in Ilala, we have almost 1.2 million people. Those also produce waste. This waste is accumulated in the street and everywhere, needs special attention. For example, per day, the production of waste, for example, in Ilala itself, is almost 1,100 tons. And this, it needs to be collected and transported to the dump site. As Ilala ourselves, we have different plans of doing this. For example, previously, before 2015, we have a capacity of collecting this waste from 47% to almost 7% by this 2020. Also improve the refuse collections. We're trying to improve that one because without refuse collection charges, we can't manage to take this all waste to the dump site. Also, we increase awareness campaign to the local communities so that they understand the issues of waste management. Also improve bylaws and strengthening law enforcement for those people who, the community, once you enforce the laws, all community, they will understand much on the waste management. But also we encourage stakeholders' involvement in managing waste. Not only that, but also establishing environmental management systems so that to have a particular data, how much we are producing, how much generation of waste in a day. But all these, we have a huge amount of waste to the city. And we are trying to look without involving different techniques to make sure that these waste are reduced or minimized. Apart from other issues, we can use recovery, reuse, and recycle. So on recycling is the topic based on. Recycling have a lot of importance, as Dr. Mafwenge explained, to protect the environment, as it said, but also reduce the need of extracting material that conserve natural resources, save energy, and prevent pollution, also increase economic security. This is explained with Mr. Dr. Mafwenge. But knowing recycling itself, as it said in EMA, number 20, section 114, as I said, the role of recycling, the municipal should encourage their people to do recycling, because without the recycling, a lot of the importance of recycling will not be there. Therefore, on doing recycling, it means that we can reduce the burden to the environment. But there's different ways which we make attention on the recycling and solid management issues. First of all, we are trying to prepare the bylaws. These bylaws help to smooth running the solid waste management issues in the city. Not only that, but also the municipal itself, in the issues of solid waste management, have huge budgets compared to any other department to make sure that these wastes are produced should be taken and recycled and sent to the dump site. Also, the department also have a skilled and enough manpower to make sure that the waste, tackling in a good way so that they can reduce the impact to the environment. So environment, also there is the involvement in private sectors. Private sectors involvement in the recycling and the waste management as per se. This is it stipulated in section 114 in the Environment Management Act. That is, to involve private sector, it helps a lot to increase the effort on dealing with the waste. In municipal level, through its budget, there is a 10% of the total budget go direct to the community, to the different stakeholders. That is to promote women, youth, and disabled people to engage directly in the entrepreneurs. This includes recycling groups that can recycle. We have almost 27 groups in Ilala Municipal, and also waste pickers. There are many, more than 3,500 people who are dealing with the waste pickers. So on dealing with the recycle, it acts as a source of income, source of job creations, and also recycling helps in many ways, in such a way that the municipal ourselves, we can determine to make sure that the things happen on the ground. But we have passed through the COVID-19. We face different crises. We face different issues, but we have seen in different ways how to reduce waste. We deal with we tried to make sure that we create, exchange information and create awareness to make sure that during that time of COVID, many people, somehow stay at home, others, they are going to the work. So what they do is just only to try to help them, giving them awareness and exchange information to them. Not only that, but also we tried to make law enforcement so that many people, they can't pollute. So the climate and the environment will be clean. Also, waste reduction fee, which we for those people who didn't be able to pay the fee, we are trying to reduce a fee so that they can cope to reduce some environment problems. Also, we extend some kind of extension of payment terms for some closed business. So we did many issues to make sure that during the COVID, some people also get back to the normal to cope with the environmental management. For this time, I can speak that a bit, so that later on, maybe if you ask me a question, I'll continue. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mr. Mapunda. This is very good to know. Very interesting to know that we have over 3,500 waste pickers working in the Ilala district. It's great that we have these numbers. I think one of the things that you mentioned that is extremely important for us all to remember is the employment opportunity that comes with recycling. To give an example of a very big country, obviously, which is Brazil. They have over 800,000 people living from waste picking. And so we have, it's great to know that we already have 3,500 non-waste pickers in the Ilala district. And we can see that there is still potential to have more, which means that we can do good for the environment and also generate employment for people, which I think is extremely important. So then I would like to now go back to Dr. get the audio right, I remind all of you that there is a chat box. So if you see on the bottom of your Zoom, you'll find a button there that you can click and go to the chat where the questions are being written, so we can answer them in the end. Now we can hear you. Here we go.
I can hear me.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I said I would just like to start from where Dr. Mafenga has left off, because my role here is two ways. First of all, to explain as to what extent Vice President Office has been involved in recycling activities. And the second thing is, what are the challenges that we're facing in terms of implementations of various laws, rules, and regulations with regards to recycling. So to start with how Vice President Office recognized recyclings, part of it has already been discussed by Dr. Mafenga, because we have Environmental Management Act, which stipulates clearly the role that should be taken by the local government authority in terms of having segregation at source, establishment of transfer stations where some recycling activities can be taking place. So Dr. Mafenga is very much exhausted on that area. But the second thing, as with regard to recycling, we are also, as a country, ratify several multilateral agreements and conventions. But one of the conventions is Basel Conventions. So if you go into Basel Conventions, it talks about the management of transboundary movements of chemicals, waste, but some of these waste, especially equipment, that of course they use the equipment. Most of them, they happen to come into our country for recycling activities. So the management of those kind of equipment fall under Basel Conventions, which we ratified as convention. But also we are ratified Bamako Conventions, which also provide limitations and control on the movements of various scrap metal issues into our country. So management of recycling equipment internationally, we just use these ratified conventions, which is as well as conventions. But apart from conventions, but as a country also, in order to domesticate these conventions, we also develop our own regulations. One of the regulations that we are having is solid waste management regulations. If you go into solid waste management regulations, it also try to clarify the roles of local government as far as the recycling concerned. The regulations, of course, stipulate the fact that, of course, we need these local government authorities to have the collection points, to have the segregation systems, to have the companies contracted in the area of jurisdictions to ensure that, of course, they are promoting this waste segregations as part of recycling activities. But also we have hazardous waste regulations. The hazardous regulations, of course, this is directly involved with the control of movement of most.
We lost your audio. I think your computer, if you can just touch whatever it is that you touched on the side. I think now you're back. No, not yet. We can't hear you. We cannot hear you. That's Hussein Omari.
Still you cannot hear me? Hello?
Yes, now we can. Now we can.
So I was saying also we are having these hazardous waste regulations. The hazardous regulations, it also involves or provide directives on how to manage movements and businesses of especially the scrap metal business in the country. This is talk about conditions for collections, storage, and transportations of these scrap metal business, which is part of recycling. But also currently we are developing the e-waste regulation, which is in the final stage. It also just deal with recycling. So currently we don't have, and I think even Tara themselves, they can testify on this. We are not doing much as recyclers in the country in terms of e-waste equipment. So also we are now providing, we are now producing or developing guidelines, which is the final stage, a regulation which is in the final stage on the management of e-waste, especially recycling part. But apart from these regulations, but also as a Vice President office, we are also having guidelines. We're also developing guidelines as a part of our responsibilities regarding management of solid waste, but particularly in this context, the recycling activities. If you go into our, we have already completed the investment guidelines. And if you go into our investment guideline, it provides the opportunities, the recycling opportunity in the country. For example, currently, there is a gap. As a country, we are producing about 400,000 metric tons of plastic waste in terms of both PE and PET. But if you look, the amount of plastic waste that is produced, it's only 20 to 30% that is being recycled. And also there are some studies, of course, conducted by the urban programs, the program, of course, financed by the FID. It showed that, of course, up to $28 million annually has been lost in Tanzania when it comes to the recycling of plastic waste. We have a number or a big amount of plastic waste that, of course, is going uncollected and unrecycled, which, of course, is amounts to about 28 million lost annually. So this is show that of an avenue that, of course, we have not, although we are having recycling activities, but of course we are not doing much. But also, if you go into papers, of course, currently we are producing about 400,000 metric tons of papers. But also the amount that is recycled is only between 20 to 30%. But e-waste is only 2 to 3% that is being recycled out of more than 25,000 million tons that have been produced. And this also applies to the used oils. It's only 5% of the used oil that is being recycled. It all goes to batteries and so on and so forth. So the guidelines, the investment guidelines shows, of course, there is an opportunity of investment in the recycling sector, and it is not yet really been exhausted. So it's also need to take this time, of course, to this data to show, of course, also they can also go through this document and see the investment opportunities and how they can engage. But the problem also, as I said, my part will be discussing not only the problems, not only the response of the VPO as far as the recycling is concerned, but also what are the challenges. But before going to the challenges, but also we as a VPO, we've been developing pilot projects. The aim of having this pilot project is to be able to inform when it comes to the development of these regulations and policies and strategies. For example, currently we are developing, so in connection with, or in collaboration with UNIDO, we are developing the pilot project in Ubungo municipality as well as Kigamboni municipality. The aim of this pilot project is development of recycling centers, so that, of course, it can be replicated to other municipalities in the country. But also we are kind of developing a proposal of domesticating the technical guideline of the Basel Conventions on management of transportations or exportation and importation of used electric equipment. All these are the part of encouraging more recycling. But the challenges have been always in the, if you look like what Dr. Mafenga has been saying, is there is a responsibility that should be done by our municipalities in terms of recycling, in terms of sourcing, or waste sourcing at the household levels, establishment of this recycling centers, and establishment of transfer stations. But this has been a problem. So probably that, of course, the municipalities, they will be at a very good place to tell us what are the challenges that, of course, for them to realize how these regulations and the instruments that have been developed by the Vice President Office to be put in place. But also, on the other hand, it also from on enforcement of these will be enforced, and of course they're the ones supposed to. They can tell us what should be done to ensure that these regulations are really being put in place. I think maybe I should end up here and just leave a room for more discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein Omari. That that was also a very good presentation. I think if you can please mute yourself. I think there is a lot of background noise coming. Thank you. And everyone else who is not speaking, please also, if you can mute yourself. Alan, if you can mute all participants, please. Okay. I think that was also a very enlightening presentation. I think it's very important for us to remember. Alan, can you please mute everyone as the admin and the host? I think it's Isaiah. Can you please mute yourself? You think there is background noise coming from your. Thank you. Here we go. Okay, so that was a very enlightening presentation, and I think it's very important for us to also mention the policy forums that are out there. It's very important to mention the Basel Convention because it has recently in 2019 actually changed the regulation for waste trade of plastics, and it was a very good move, basically to not allow countries anymore to basically be exporting waste, and especially plastic waste, in an unlimited way. So it's very important to think about that. It's also very good to know that about 20 to 30% of the plastics produced in Tanzania is being recycled, because that's very high. If you think historically, since we started producing plastic, only about 80% of all the plastics produced in the world has been recycled. I think as something else that we need also to remember is that plastic and recycling in general is market-based and not material-based. Can you please mute yourself, Isaiah? I think it's you again. Alan, can you mute the participants? We have a lot of background noise. Thank you. I think it's also very important to remember when you think about recycling, that recycling is market-based and not material-based. So that means that a material that can be recycled ends up not being recycled if a country doesn't have the infrastructure and the market for that material to be recycled. So if no one is going to invest money on recycling if that is not profitable in that particular country. I think also important to remember that with COVID-19 now, the price of oil, which is like petrol, which is basically the material that plastics are made from, is very low. And through that, recycling becomes even more challenging because it's cheaper basically to buy virgin plastic than it is to recycle. And that also has great impact on the recycling industry and on the waste pickers. So thank you again, everyone. And we have several questions that have been put on the chat. I would like to ask some of them. I think I would like to start with a question about several people have asked in general, basically how we can know what are the initiatives that the government has in terms of supporting the recycling sector, supporting the environmental sector as well. And that's a question that I also have because I think as I think you might know, I am the executive director for NIP Fagio, and sometimes it's very good for us to be able to connect initiatives. So if you want to know more about the initiatives like Dr. Hussein Omari has just mentioned about pilot projects in Ubuntu and Kigamboni, what is the best way for us to get that information? Dr. Hussein, if you could answer that question for us. If you want to know more about initiatives that are out there that VPO is supporting, that are somehow connected to the environment, or to the recycling industry? Is there a way for us to get that information? Sorry, you are muted, so we can't hear you. We still have some background noise, so I'd like to ask everyone who is not speaking to make sure you are muted. Thank you. Dr. Hussein, you are muted, so we cannot hear you. Are you able to hear me?
Because there are issues, we have a number of landfills which have been supported by external funds in, I think, in Kigamboni and others. Okay, and most of them have been designed, okay, to ensure that the recycling, even if it has not taken place at the source, but at those landfills, then they are taken care of. I don't know whether that was a question. I didn't know. I couldn't get to right.
I think the question that people have is how basically they can get to know better the initiatives that are being supported by the government, and also how can the government support the recycling sector in general. So, like how can, for example, VPO support opportunities for small scale and individual recyclers, or how can someone connect to NEMKI to better know about the regulations that are in place and how they can use that in their favor.
Okay. As NEMKI, we've tried our best to create awareness, of course, to the general public, okay, in relation to sorting the waste at source. And so far, we have put up a program in place between NEMKI, Vice President Office, and the local government authorities, especially the environmental management officers at local level. Okay, we should have met sometimes last year, but unfortunately, due to enacting of the regulation on hazardous waste management, and also because of the issues of COVID, we have not met. The reason was definitely we need to have a closer engagement between NEMKE, the Vice President's office, and the local government. First of all, providing them with the capacity, because a number of local governments do not have the capacity of environmental management officers. Most of the local governments have got health officers who operate as a wildlife officer. So this particular sector of environment at local level has not been given the due consideration in terms of budgets, in terms of allocating sufficient resources to be able to implement, okay, what is already provided for them under EMA 2004. So that's what is lacking so far. Trying our best to bridge that gap, okay, so that we provide capacity, okay, to those environmental management officers, but also train environmental inspectors. And as you know, environmental inspectors are the people who are also carrying out inspections to ensure that everything at local level goes according to the law. So those are some of the efforts. They are still continuing, and we are planning to meet very soon. And that will also go hand in hand with updating some of the legislations which actually need to be revised so that we give more power to those people at the local level.
Thank you. And that's great to know. I think it's also important that Patrick Matandala has a question here. And one of the things that he has highlighted is the importance of the informal sector in recycling, which is a very great point. The informal sector plays a huge role and can also benefit a lot of people that can make a livelihood from recycling. And so his question is, are there any initiatives either by PARA or the municipal council to formalize their operations? Or even if you don't think necessarily about formalizing, but even to support the informal sector in the recycling sector? I would like to, I think, give this question to Mr. Mapunda.
Yes. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, so the question is, are there any initiatives from the municipal council to formalize the operation of the informal sector?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is an initiative made by municipals to make sure that the recycling and these groups are engaged fully in the recycling. One of the initiatives to make them awareness raising to these groups to make sure that they can understand what is recycling, and also to form different groups so that they can recycle some materials and then use, because that one is where they can get opportunity of employment. But also other initiative, municipal set a budget for the recycling, set aside almost 10% of the total budget to the women, youth, and the disabled people, so that they can engage in the entrepreneurs, so that increase recycling groups. We have almost 27 groups whereby they can involve directly into recycling. Not only that, but also try to involve private sectors and NGOs on recycling, like so many in Kariako and the other places. So there is a lot of initiative that government or local government did on the recycling issues. Thank you.
That's really great to know as well. I would like to ask you, if you want to know more about these initiatives, what would be the best way for people to get more information? Mr. Mapunda, if
Yes.
anyone wants to know more about the initiatives that you have just mentioned, or if they would like the support of municipal governments, what would be the best way for them to engage? Who should they basically talk to, or where should they look for the information?
We are very open again to anyone who is wants to engage into the recycling sector, because ourselves, we are keen to see that actually all the local governments in Tanzania fulfills the requirement of the law, including the regulation, which is already in place. And this regulation actually is so much, it has been structured to allow any potential entrepreneur, you need to commence business. But now, I think a larger part still rests with us, the government. I have to admit on that, in the sense that as enforcers of the law, we have not pushed the local government's authorities enough to implement all what we call the provisions of the law, which includes identifying what kind of solid waste is being generated from institutions, labeling and what type of containers they should be allocated to each institution depending upon the waste, but also, sorting, sorting whether the waste is organic, whether it's plastic, whether it's paper, or whether it's glass or metal. Now, if once we manage to accomplish that step of sorting waste at source, then the business becomes booming. I can give you an example of scrap metals right now. Scrap metals is one of the booming business in Tanzania. Because why? Because steel industries are in dire need of raw materials, okay, for feeding their plants. Somebody, rather than importing billets from India, from China, from elsewhere, he would find it rather easier to get scrap metals, locally, and then it's cheaper. Not only cheaper, but they use also less energy because that material has already been processed. So it means you are using less material, but also you are also helping the environment by taking away whatever garbage or whatever waste which is in the environment. You are turning into something that is usable, that can be used in the construction industry. So the economy is booming. So we have achieved when it comes to issues which are like metallic, but with respect to glass, steel, but with respect to plastics, things are getting better. And because of the polluter pays principle, when we are applying it, I've seen a number of beverage industries or those who are producing these mineral waters, whatever, they have the responsibility to collect those plastic wastes. And I've seen a number of them offering like 400 kilogram or 1,000 shillings for kilograms, something like that, or 400 shillings per kilogram of used plastic bottle. That is a positive step, because now instead of these industries that are producing soft drinks, importing raw materials from outside, they are able to create, a local economy by giving an employment to the collectors, and then they recycle those plastic bottles, and then we save in terms of foreign exchange, but at the same time, we have improved our local economy. So in terms of plastics, in terms of metals, we are okay. But in terms of organic waste, in terms of glass, we are still yet behind. Not only that, but also sorting at source is not yet being undertaken. So it's expensive for the municipalities, to collect a lot of waste into their landfills, only to allow those collectors, start sorting while things have been dumped at a landfill. It is not healthy for them. It is also expensive, but also it's not effective, because a lot of them will end up being left out there. Now, once they are left out there, you find that those landfills will have a shorter life. If you could have been used for 20 years, you'll fill it within a period of 10 years. So those are some of the negative impacts which we are getting purely because this particular act and regulations has not been enforced in full. And that's why I've reported, or I've said it soon, that we are soon going to meet with the local government authorities, environmental management officers, so that we plan, so that at least we see how we can raise awareness to the public and how we are going to undertake all those so that the recycling industry can boom.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mafwenga. We are a little bit over time. I would ask the ones that are able to stay with us for another 10 minutes. We can, until, let's say, until 3:15, so we can answer a couple more questions here. And also, whatever questions don't get answered throughout the meeting, we will still be taking notes of all these questions, and we'll give them to the speaker so then we can answer them later and then send the responses to the people who asked the questions. On the segregation at source topic, I think one thing that I would like to mention is that us at NIPTE Fagio, we are implementing a zero waste project in Dar es Salaam, so a zero waste model. It's a community-based zero waste model to manage solid waste. And we have done a pilot in 3 municipalities, Ilala, Temeke, and Ubungo last year. And basically the compliance to segregation at source, the number of the percentage of the houses that have done the segregation at source as requested throughout the pilot was at 86.25%. So over 85% of the people were willing to actually segregate the waste at source if asked to, and if then they had a collection to that waste. So I think that's very encouraging, and that shows that the communities are ready to do the segregation at source. Then it's about implementation. We are hoping to scale that project and to be able to implement it in a larger scale now. Just asking a couple more questions that have been dropped here in the chat. There is a question from two people asking if what initiatives are taken to encourage large-scale investments in recycling, as there is a huge gap between the waste produced and recycled. And that's coming from both Sarah and also Mehul Shah. They are both asking what kind of initiatives are taken to encourage large-scale investments in recycling, and in terms of the gap between the waste produced and recycled, basically. So basically, how can the government support the growth of the recycling sector by supporting the private sector? I would like to direct that question, if possible, to Mr. Hussein Omari, if you can hear us now. We cannot hear you, so I think you are still muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
There is a number of initiatives that the government is doing in terms of promoting the recyclings. Apart from Vice President Office, as I said before, being involved in the development of regulations and so on and so forth, but also we are involved in development of pilot projects that can be scaled up. So we are just developing pilot projects, as I said before. Currently, we are about to start two pilot projects, one in Ubungo and the other one in Kigamboni. So we need to see, of course, the product of that, or the successful of those two pilots, and then I will see how we can scale it up. But of course, as a government, to know that, of course, or to show that we recognize the role of recycling, that's why, of course, we've been developing these regulations from time to time, policies, as well as development of these pilot projects. So the role of VPO is strictly on the development of the policy and coordinations, but not to the actual physical ground kind of actions.
Okay, so in the case of, like, if people would like to have a better sense of how they could be supported on the ground in their businesses, what would be the best way for them to get that information, or what government agency would be the right one for them to talk to?
The way the government is structured, the central government, of course, which is the VPO roles, is coordinations and the policy development. When it comes to National Environment Management Council, it's about the enforcement of the Environment Management Act. But when it comes to the local government authorities, they are the ones now doing the things on the ground. So including having those public-private partnerships with the private sectors to see how they can work together. So the best place for them to go is on the local government authorities, where they have the mandates of in their own jurisdiction, rather than these policymakers and the enforcers.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers many questions that you have in our chat, for people asking about basically how to get better support from the government or to engage. There are a couple questions also about how they can basically get licenses for their businesses. So I think all these detailed answers, I think the best way to get an answer would be going to the local government, and to be able to get a better sense of how basically you can work within the government infrastructure and then get support. I think one of the things that you can see from these presentations is that the government definitely sees the value of the recycling sector and is trying with the tools available to get more people engaged and to increase the sector. So I think there is an opening there. So I think this covers most of the questions that we have on the chat. There is another question here that someone asked about awareness raising. Let me just remember. It's Joseph Rugatiri asked if there are any education and awareness programs provided to the community and students about the significance of the recycling process. I think some of the speakers have mentioned some initiatives there. You can also, if you'd like to get more information from what NIPE Fagil is doing, you can also come to us and try to talk to you. Someone else is asking about education in terms of adding the environmental education to the national curriculum. I think that also we can try to answer that question later, as well as some of the questions about e-waste and glass and all of that. So I think for now it's like 3:15. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. I think it's 5:15, and I thank you all for joining this meeting. Of course, I just wanted to find if there is a way whereby we can have like a collaboration between TARA and the authorities, named KVPO and the LGA, so that we reduce the gap of information, as well as we add value to what they are, the initiative they're coming up with them.
Yeah, so I think again, TARA is a new association that it has the potential to really improve the communication, the collaboration in the recycling sector, and can play a very important role in terms of bridging all the recycling actors with the different instances of the government. So I would recommend that anyone that is here and is working in the recycling sector or would like to work in the recycling sector and is not yet registered to TARA, that you do. And I'm very hopeful that this is going to open several channels of communication here for everyone.
And maybe
so
to add on, we would like also, because we are the ones developing guidelines, strategies, and sometimes regulations. But of course, development of these regulations and guidelines is very much depends on the information from the ground. They are the ones informing us on what is happening on the ground, and then we can make some adjustments. So with relation to the COVID, maybe TARA, they could have maybe information or a study on how much that the sector has been really affected during the COVID. And maybe that, of course, can lead us to develop guidelines or strategies as far as when it comes to the pandemics. How can we react in terms of this crisis?
Sure, we have done a study, and I will share with you some of the findings. We have like 20, almost more than 20 respondents. So I will share with you the reaction, the perception of the recyclers towards the COVID-19 crisis.
Thanks.
I think that's great. And also, again, I encourage everyone to get in touch with TARA if you would like also to know more about this study and everything. So for now, I would like to thank everyone that has joined the meeting, and also thank our speakers, Dr. Samuel Mafanga, Dr. Hussein Omari, Mohammed Omari, and Mr. Abdul Mapunda, who I think did a great job on presenting here about the recycling sector under their responsibilities with the government. It's very meaningful to have this meeting, and I hope that this is the first of many other meetings that we'll be able to have. Anyone who would like to have maybe access to the recording of this, or would like to have ask more questions after the meeting, please drop your email addresses here on the chat box. So we will be able to share with you both the responses to the questions that have not been answered, and also the recording of the meeting. And also TARA can then contact you and send you an introductory email. I think that's it. Thank you everyone for joining. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Hello.
Aleni.
Yeah.
Aleni, nilikuwa nauliza kuna directory ya recyclers au kuna information zozote kuhusiana na recycling sector especially kwa Dar es Salaam na Tanzania nzima, kiasi kwamba mtu akiwa labda na mzigo wake anajua pa kupeleka?
Kuna directory lakini bado haijawa full filled, yani haijawa complete. We are encouraging more people to join to add more informations, and ndio hiyo so far hakuna ile kwamba mtu anaweza kujua like yuko mkoani au yuko wapi anaweza kujua kwamba watu wakupeleka waste yake. Ni initiative ya kila mmoja, anajitangaza mwenyewe kama zaidi kama tani paki ndio wanajitangaza wenyewe kwa ajili ya kuweza kupata hizi waste. Umeona? Lakini pia nadhani ukiangalia hii video kama kuna kitu kipya Tanzania, huyu jamaa anaonekana kama yuko Tanzania. Hiyo recycling ya plastic waste kama hiyo ndio nimeona kwenye YouTube. Nadhani pia ni kitu kizuri pia hichi.
Yuko wapi, Tanga au wapi?
Sijajua hapo ni wapi.
Okay. Unaweza ukashare link ya hiyo video?
Nitashare.
Share na mimi niangalie, inaonekana ni kitu kizuri.
Naomba uweke email yako hapa kwenye chat box kwa sababu ukitaka kupata maelezo zaidi baadaye tunaweza kushare na wewe tukiwa na email yako.
Sure, let me share.
Nishaweka Ana.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sawa.
Sawa jamani, mimi nashukuru sana.
Asante sana Allen, asante sana Tara.
Asante sana Tania, Anna, and all the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Anna. Thank you.
Okay, asante sana pia Tara, nipe fagio Dr. Hussein na washiriki wote kwa ujumla. Shukran.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so bye.
Bye.
Lo, naona mmebaki wengine. Au tuweke mziki kidogo?
Ikionekana muda ulikuwa unaruhusu sana. Yaani mmekatisha kabla ya muda.
Yaani watu walikuwa wana
Bado
hamu
mambo mengi.
sana. I say,
Eh.
yani nimejifunza kitu kikubwa sana.
Weka mziki. Weka mziki.
Basi wacha niweke mziki bwana.
Watutunze mazingira weka.
Ale niacha fujo, ale niacha fujo.
Niweke mziki gani niambie? Niambie niweke mziki gani bwana?
Weka ule tutunze mazingira.
Bwana tushazungumza mazingira, inabidi tutafute mwingine bwana wa Tanzania bwana.
Weka tulifresh basi.
Kama upi taja?
Wote unaopenda ale ni bwana wewe weka.
Wewe taja bwana, haraka haraka bwana.
Ale ni bwana hujui wimbo mzuri, wewe weka wimbo mzuri.
Nakusubiria bwana, usichelewe bwana.
Weka bwana, sio kaweka nyimbo nyingine bwana. Wewe weka huo wimbo ambao unaupenda na sisi tutaupenda tu.
Sara. Yupo? Sara, tuambie wimbo gani tuweke? Nini? Tuweke upi? Haya, sawa, ngoja nitafute basi hapo hapo. Haya. Sijui ndo upi huo bwana nye. Sijui karantini sijui. Kuna fresh ambazo unauza? Kuna fresh ambazo unauza? Hapana, kuna hizi hapa. Kisa mauza. Unauza?
Sisi tumezana. Mara nini inakuwa kazi?
Okay. See you. See you.
See you, Alan. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So we are
Thank you so
sharing
much.
some of the tips on our groups and the social media.
Yeah.
Okay, great.